this is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Well, welcome to Red Pill Nation Radio, Daily Dose of Reality. I'm your host, Nathan Davis, and we have a lot to run down today. First, I want to go over BRICS countries building new internet to avoid NSA spying. You've actually got a number of countries that have gone before the UN in order to try and stop, or I'm sorry, this one, you've got a number of countries, going, see, this is what, there's a lot going on with this. You've got a number of countries that are starting their own internet. They're actually running cable from Russia to Brazil. It goes across Cape Town. I mean, it's hitting a lot of areas, but they have a fiber optic cable they're going to run that will avoid being interconnected with the U.S. internet. So this is a drastic measure by these people in order to stop it. I mean, you had the German chancellor, who was Merkel. Her phone was tapped, and Brazil, they've been angered at some wiretapping that's happened to them. And they said that they can pull this off. There was a person, a Washington blogger, who said that BRICS countries have the muscle to pull it off. Each of the BRICS countries are in the top 25 largest economies in the world. China has the world's second largest economy. India is third. Russia is sixth. Brazil 7th. And South Africa 25th. So these are the key nations that are involved in this. But yeah, so that came up on Infowars.com. It was Paul Joseph Watson article, and I thought it was interesting because it does show that they are trying to create another internet just to avoid NSA spying. How ridiculous is that? To avoid American spying, they're creating their own internet. They're spinning their own commerce to run a fiber optic cable under the sea. There are people that are saying that this will do little since the NSA has tapped undersea cables before, but I think with this it may deter them. It may be harder to do. I'm sure if there was activity in the area around the cable, these countries would be alerted to it. But it might deter spying since it would take that type of effort to get to it, but putting it past this government, I wouldn't. And now on to the article that I was referring to earlier. Is Brazil and Germany today join forces to press for the adoption of a UN general resolution that promotes the right of privacy on the internet, marking the first major international effort to restrain the national security agency's intrusion into the online communications of foreigners, according to a diplomatic source familiar with the push. And this is an article from, let's see, it's posted by several columnists. I don't see the foreignpolicy.com, that's where it came from. And basically they're saying that they're trying to pass a resolution, actually extend a certain international covenant on political and civil rights that was enacted in 1966 and came into force in 1976, but doesn't have any real article pertaining to the internet, of course, because it was passed in 1976. So they're basically trying their best to protect their privacy. You had the German chancellor. She called Obama when she found out that her phone had been tapped. And, of course, the White House said that it would never happen again. It would not be tapped now or in the future, it actually says. But, I mean, they didn't tell the chancellor that her phone was being tapped before, so I really don't think that's an honest answer from the president about future violations of their rights. Now, of course, there was let me see if I can find his statement. There was a intelligence agency, a former senior intelligence officer. There's a mixture of hypocrisy and outrage, along with real objections here. I don't know where the line is. The idea that political leaders are out of bounds for foreign intelligence is amusing. But on the other hand, this business about trusting allies is a big one. My guess is there is a real annoyance here. Well, my thing is that you don't go after people that are supposedly our allies, and you use common sense when it comes to intelligence gathering. Unfortunately, right now we have a schizophrenic group of agencies that are just policing everything and anything. They're filtering through tons of data. We're building a facility out in Utah to hold the huge amount of data that they're going to be filtering through. And people don't see a problem with this. I mean, and here we have foreign leaders being tapped. Edward Snowden, he dropped a bombshell Thursday about basically the leaders that were being tapped. And also, in Thursday when he was, they spoke to him, he didn't mention her, but Dianne Feinstein has repeatedly said that these programs are not surveillance. I'd really like to know what the heck she calls it, but anyway. And he said our representatives in Congress tell us that this is not surveillance. They're wrong. That's what Snowden says. He didn't mention Feinstein, but Feinstein has repeatedly said this, that it's not considered this. And this is the most recent thing that she said. The call records program is not surveillance. It does not collect the content of any communication, nor do the records include names or locations. But they are collecting all the phone records, phone numbers. It wouldn't take much to find out who is associated with that phone number. And I really don't believe that they're not able to pull up the calls. I know that they do. And this is the thing. They've been lying over all this time. And here this is Feinstein, who is just in the back pocket of Obama, sitting there saying, it's not surveillance, don't worry about it. Well, that line's been used before. It was used for satellite imagery, which I actually have an article in here I'm going to get to right after that, after saying this. But when they came out with I can't remember the movie. It had Will Smith in it. But it showed them basically surveilling him from satellites. I'm sure you know which movie I'm talking about. But they asked somebody in the NSA if that was possible, and he said, oh, no, that's not possible. We can't do that. Well, a few years before that movie came out, there was actually a Dateline, I believe it was, interview. And they actually had somebody from the intelligence agency show them how close they could get, but they said they could get closer. Now, they were on a bridge out in the middle of a park. I can't remember which park they were in. Probably in New York City, Central Park. But they were standing on a bridge, and they got to a point where they were basically looking down. You can make out what they were wearing. You could see some of the facial features. And the guy said, we can get closer than this, but we're not going to show that to you. So they've lied about that. It came about during Bush's administration that if you use key phrases, key words on the phone, that they could flag you. So obviously they're listening to the communications. If not having people sit there and listen to them, they actually have computers listening to them that will flag and pull you as a suspected terrorist for saying bomb or boom or, stuff of that nature. Common words that don't necessarily have any meaning towards terrorist acts. They actually had 2 people from Britain, I believe it was 2 years ago, that were coming to America for vacation, and they said, oh, this is going to be the bomb, or something like that. They used some British slang that included the word bomb. They were actually turned around at the airport and sent back after hours of questioning about what they meant by that. And even though they explained that it was jargon and it had nothing to do with terrorist activities, they were still put on a plane and sent back to England because of them being suspected of being terrorists or something. So I think they can listen in on us. I'm sure most of the people listening would say that as well, that it's lies in order to basically hide what they're really doing, and they're not doing a very good job of it anymore. I mean, really. And going on to surveillance, I mean, this one guy actually got busted by Google Earth. Curtis W. Croft was busted by police who used Google Earth to look at his pot garden. He lives in Oregon, and he has a certain amount that he can grow. Authorities used the Google Earth and were able to tell that he had 94 plants instead of the 30 that he was supposed to have. So here they used a private entity, Google Earth, to basically surveil somebody. And I would consider that unlawful because there was no warrant, and the images from a satellite of your house, I mean, really that's invasion of privacy. I mean, I understand the point of Google Earth, but it does kind of step on your right of privacy. And especially if you have law enforcement now using it to see what you're doing. I mean, even though these are still images, they're not moving or anything like that yet, to have somebody sit there, a police force use this type of tactic to go after this man. He's 50 years old, and basically he's been arrested from surveillance from Google Earth. That is just crazy, and that's not the purpose of it. But for them to use it that way, that's just sad, and I think it does step on that man's rights. And again, getting back to Snowden, NSA monitoring phone calls of 35 world leaders, and that was what Edward Snowden brought forward to The Guardian. And it said the phone numbers, and this was from Reuters. Phone numbers were passed on to the U.S. National Security Agency by an official in another government department, according to the documents. So basically, you had people within certain areas of the government that were corresponding with these leaders, and they turned their phone records over to the National Security Agency so they could then take and use those numbers to listen in on these leaders. And of course, in this document, it does not have information on who these leaders or who these government officials were that actually turned in their phone records for spying purposes. That would be nice to know. In other news, healthcare.gov. Team Obama and its dysfunctional 500 million lines of code. Now, granted, my website crashed today. It was my fault. I didn't have a backup, and I went to update my PHP builder. When I did, it corrupted the code, and I couldn't get it back. It even corrupted the backup. And I did not, and I feel dumb for not doing it, I did not make a local backup of the website. So, I'm actually in the process of rebuilding libertythemovement.com. It should be up by the end of the weekend, fully back and functioning. Probably look a little different, but that's okay. But this is crazy. I have never heard of a website that has 500 million lines of code. And just to give you an example, Vista was one of the worst operating systems that Microsoft came out with. It was so bloated. It had so much in the Aereo visuals that it really made it a cumbersome operating system. And that only had 50 million lines of code. Facebook has 20 million lines of code. Well, here you have this bloated monstrosity that has 500 million lines of code. It doesn't make sense, and they've had 4 years to plan this out. And they still couldn't get it right. First off. Second off, I don't know how they screwed this up unless it was intentional. 500 million lines of code is a ridiculous amount. So I really don't know what they hit, or what they were doing when they made this, but it sounds like a total mess. It's already a total mess anyway. I mean, it's not going to work. Obamacare is a joke. And here you have the Democratic Party scrambling to save it. It's not going to work. It is a piece of crap. And speaking of pieces of crap, Sebelius, I don't work for people who want me to resign. So basically she's saying that the American people that want her to resign, she doesn't work for you. And that is Kathleen, Sebelius, I think is how you pronounce her last name. Health and Human Services Secretary. The one that is heading up the Affordable Care Act. Well, Ms. Sebelius, I have put a petition on the White House website, and I would, encourage any listener out there to please go to the petition website and look for this petition that is asking for her resignation because she doesn't want to listen to the people. So I think the people need to rise up and make her listen. Either she needs to resign or she needs to be removed from office. Anybody of any agency, even though I disagree with the formation of these agencies and their purpose, but anybody that's a government agent that is a public worker should never sit there and say that I don't work for these people. They're American citizens that don't like what you're doing. So, you need to watch what you say. I think you need to resign. This whole thing is a sham. You've had 4 years to plan it out right, and still couldn't get it right on day one with a 500 million line code website. And you sit there and say, well, the people that want me to resign, I don't work for them. No, you do. And they're mad. A lot of them agreed with Obamacare and are mad because it's not working out. I, on the other hand, did not. And I still don't like Obamacare. But for somebody to sit there and say that is very asinine, and it's kind of telling people, well, you can disagree with me, but you can't do anything about it. So, if you get a chance, go up onto the petition site of the White House, look for that petition to have her resign, and please sign it. Please, click and sign. We need 100,000 by in 30 days. So please, share, get it out there, let people know. It's up on Red Pill Nations group on Facebook. So if you go up there, you can find it. And I just want people to sign it. I want people to let her know that she does answer to the American people, and her actions are watched by us. And if we disagree with how she is handling taxpayer dollars, then yes, we are going to have her, terminated. These people in the federal government need to understand that they work for us. We do not work for them. And sitting there saying you're doing something in our best interest doesn't necessarily mean you are. And when people stand up and say they're against it, you listen. You don't sit there and say, well, it's a law. Slavery was a law. I don't see too many people toting that banner. Give me a break. In other news, 7.3 magnitude quake registered off the coast of Fukushima with a possible tsunami. Now, I didn't hear any more about the tsunami. Of course, you turn into CNN, they're talking about Iran again. But I will get to that in a minute. With this earthquake and the threat of a tsunami, even though it's only going to be 1 meter high, you've already got a compromised reactor that has 3 cores that have melted down, even though they really won't tell you that they have. And they're releasing a lot of this water that they're using to cool these melted cores back into the ocean. So they're releasing nuclear material into the ocean. And that's causing all kinds of havoc. So now you add on top of this another fairly powerful earthquake. And this could be another major disaster, another major release of radioactive material into the water. And, of course, you're not going to hear that on the news. They always cover it up and say, it's not that bad. Go ahead and eat the glowing green fish from the Pacific Ocean. That's fine. Without realizing that, these people that report the news in the mainstream media, they're just funny. Because the only person they're hurting is themselves, because they're a part of this country. It's not like you're outside this country reporting the news. Anything that goes on in this country that you sit there and clap your hands to that's bad is still going to affect you. And, ignoring the fact that we have nuclear material leaking into the plastic ocean because the Pacific Ocean basically has tons of plastic in it, is going to cause a huge environmental nightmare that's already there. It's going to increase it. But, yeah. Speaking of nuclear materials, I turned into CNN for 2 minutes because that's really all I can stand of mass media nowadays. And they were talking about Iran may have nuclear weapon grade uranium in 1 month. And that's what Israel's saying. They're saying that in 1 month, Iran could have nuclear-grade uranium. The White House is saying more like a year. But they're both talking about within a visible spectrum Iran having a nuclear device. I doubt it. This just seems like they're, the shutdown's over, let's drum the war drums again, and let's, go for the big dog, Iran, who has gone off the dollar standard, I think, or is close to it, and refuses to work with a tyrannical, bully. Us. And them having one nuclear weapon is nothing. Israel has over 125. Unregistered, that we gave them. And nothing against the Israelis. They should be allowed to defend themselves, but they can't, sit there and say that their neighbors, because they don't like them, can't defend themselves either. It's their right. They should be able to. sitting there saying, you can't defend yourself, and the nation that says it, and the nation that's handing this down, and the nation that's going after these countries is the only nation that's ever detonated a nuclear device, and twice at that, killing hundreds of thousands of people. And yet we're the one dictating to the rest of the world that you can't do that? How does that make any sense? If we were so against nuclear weapons, if we were so against chemical weapons, we would not have them. And we would not have used them. Talk of Syria using chemical weapons. What do you think we did in Vietnam? Napalm, Agent Orange, all of those things were chemical weapons. Napalm was horrible. It incinerated the person. It stuck to their skin and incinerated them. And if it stopped burning, well, you've got hot liquid all over your skin. Yeah, it's a lovely way to die. I'm so glad our country came up with it. And then you have, in the news today, Jose Reyes identified as Sparks Middle School shooter. But the weird thing about this article, and this article came from the Huffington Post, is that it talked about, but it never confirmed if this was the trigger to cause him to do this, but they said that they had been watching a anti-bullying video that their whole district was using in Nevada. Or the whole state. I don't know if it's the whole state or if the whole district was. But it was this anti-bullying video that dramatized a child taking a gun to school to scare his aggressors. Or taking on the school bus to scare his aggressors. And they're saying that the video, which uses the scenario as an illustration of the wrong way to respond, is being, pointed at as being the cause of this, boy's outburst, shooting. Because he shot the teacher, he shot two of his classmates, and shot himself in the head. 12 years old. And there's some things that don't add up here. One other thing I found interesting about this was the 45-year-old teacher, Michael Lansbury, was an ex-Marine who coached basketball and soccer and was known by all as a big fan of Batman. Now, I don't know if that's any connection to the Aurora shooting, but I just found that odd that they added that in. And then at the principal, because they're at another school right now, said that the kids want to know, what does their building look like? Is it okay? What is everything like? And these are the questions she says she's getting from her kids. That doesn't sound like normal questions from kids to me. But anyway, and they talked to some of the kids about the video, and they said they watched that a month ago. So the article was a little, unclear. They put that in there, stating that it was this video, an anti-bullying video that they had watched, that could have been the trigger. But they didn't really have any evidence of that, nor connection to it. And then they have kids saying, well, we watched it earlier this month. So, almost a month ago. So I think more is going to come to light on this. But, I want to know if that kid was on some type of antidepressants. I think a lot of these kids nowadays are on antidepressants. And, it pushes them off the deep end. But we're not supposed to, talk about that. The fact that these antidepressants that are also drugs. You ask many Americans nowadays, what's a drug? And they say, oh, marijuana, crack, cocaine. None of them say Prozac, Ritalin. There's a disconnect in this country between, what people perceive as a drug and what actually is. Just because a doctor prescribes it does not mean it's the best thing for you. And a lot of these mind-altering antidepressant drugs are horrible. They're horrible. And they cause people to have suicidal thoughts. They cause people to be disconnected from themselves. They feel like they're not of themselves. And so you wonder why, they act out in this manner, like in Aurora or Newtown or any of the other places. It's, if you want to look at the, not any kind of MK Ultra conspiracy or anything else, just look at the facts that they were all on some type of prescription drugs. Let's just look at that for a moment, okay? The FDA allowed these drugs on the market. You have a lot of people that have had suicidal thoughts. You have a lot of people that have homicidal thoughts on these drugs. You have a lot of people that feel like they're not in their own body. They feel disconnected from reality. But they still allow these, drugs to be sold. But, oh, nope, marijuana, that's horrible. That's a bad drug. I've never seen anybody commit suicide, go out and kill people on marijuana. But I have on Prozac and Ritalin and all these other ones because it happens in the news all the time. And yes, we could look at, the mind control spirit conspiracy and all that. But if you just want to look at the baseline reality is that an agency of the government allows drugs onto the market that cause people to lose their mental faculties and go out and do something that people say, well, I never thought he would do that. He was such a nice guy. He was always rational. And then they put him on these drugs and all of a sudden they fly off the deep end. That's scary to me. That in this country that's acceptable. And that the fact that the doctors still issue these drugs. They're our first line of defense. They're the people we're supposed to trust with our health issues. And yet you go to them and they prescribe you poison. Most psychologists nowadays will listen to you, talk about your life, what's going on, and then get out the prescription pad and write you a prescription. Everything's solved with drugs with them. It is not something where, let's work out a rational plan to try to help you cope with this. Let's work out goal setting. Da-da-da-da-da. No! Let's give you some pills. It's ridiculous. We're over-medicating our population and wondering why they're dumbed down. And then it makes you wonder if adding fluoride in the water is something negative, especially when you have facts that say it is. Chlorine, all these different things that we intake through that. And then you have GMOs in the food. You have prescription drugs being forced down your throat. It's infuriating to me to think that people find this acceptable and argue adamantly for it. Then they want to get... And see, this is the other disconnect that really boggles my mind. I know, I'm on fire tonight. I'm just... The website went down and But what boggles my mind is those that sit there and want to keep giving their personal liberties to the government. That they want to keep giving the rights over them to the government. And what the disconnect is that they don't understand that if you kept a lot of these laws at the local level, that they would have more impact on them. You have very little impact when you move it up the chain and give it to the federal government. Those laws are hard to get rid of. You can't just, go to a local court and have it overturned. Now, if it's at the local level, you can work your way up the chain. You can go local, state, then Supreme Court. You have a chain in which you can, strengthen your argument. Find out your weaknesses in it. With federal laws, first you have to get a certain number of state courts to sit there and say, this is unconstitutional. Then you can go to the Supreme Court with it, but there's no guarantee it will go through. And the fact of the matter is that the state rulings, no matter how many you have, doesn't matter. They don't have to overturn the law. You can work on it in your state, though. But I think that the disconnect is the fact that people think that if we give it to the federal government, they'll do a better job of it than at the local and state level. And we've been doing this for years, and it hasn't worked. And the only argument people have is Jim Crow laws and segregation laws. Segregation laws were overturned by the NAACP through the Supreme Court. And then it was taking and trying to get these states to overturn the laws. And it was the government enforcing the ruling. You never had politicians come forward and try to end these segregation laws on their own. And what they don't understand is, and I think that if you turn that on its head and you say, well, what if segregation was a federal law? It probably would still be in effect today because it would not be something that would easily be overturned. Look at Prohibition. It took 10 years, over 10 years, for it to be repealed. Of course, that was an amendment, but still, bad legislation. So yeah, you don't want to create laws at the federal level that can be handled at the local and state, and especially at the local. I think most law creation should be handled at the local level because the people have the most influence over the lawmakers. And the lawmakers in that county have to live under the laws they create. The federal government doesn't live under the laws they create. Obamacare's proof of that. They sat there and made themselves immune to it. But you won't see that at a county level. If they ever did that, the people would tar and feather them. They have access to those politicians. You don't have access to the people in the federal government, and yet people want to keep giving them more power. Total disconnect from reality. And they call us, libertarians, constitutionalists, whatever, independents, idealist. No! We're rationalists. You're the idealist. You expect some rational outcome coming from a government that's never done that. Please explain that to me. Good God. Now I do have, because this was a big thing this week, was Russell Brand went on to a UK show hosted by Jeremy Paxman. And now there's certain people that say that what he's saying is idiotic, and what I think is, yes, I don't agree with his methodology for how to change things. Redistribution of wealth, things of that nature, I don't agree with. But he fundamentally says that he sees major flaws within the system. He doesn't vote, things like that. I understand where he's coming from, and it's a good thing that we have people waking up on both sides. So he might be a liberal or left-leaning individual that doesn't get the full picture and doesn't understand economics and things of that nature like he should, but at least he knows there's a problem, and he has influence. So hopefully that'll make people wake up and be willing to listen to other alternatives than what we have. He's saying there's a major flaw in the system. That's a good thing. We shouldn't sit there and condemn him because we don't agree with his political views. We should congratulate him on stepping forward and saying, look, the system's messed up. There needs to be changes. We may not agree with the changes, and that's perfectly fine. But at least we should have an open debate. And at least people should talk about it. When people are silent, when people don't say anything, when people just go, oh, it's great, everything's awesome, that's a problem. And especially when they're a celebrity. And a lot of them keep toting the Obama bandwagon. I mean, there's been videos where they put together and, I'm going to stand behind my president. Everything they talked about in this video I watched was voluntarism. And they had Jay-Z and Beyonce and a number of others. But they get to the end and they say, I'm going to serve my president. That to me is a mindless statement. That means that you're not going to do anything but sit there and and do what he says no matter what. Even if it's wrong, it's okay. I agree with him because his name's Obama. And that's another problem in this country. People start sitting there and siding with Obama because he's Obama. He's black. You know, all the wrong reasons to side with somebody. And if you point that out, you're racist. That's wrong. You know, it's not being racist. It's saying, look, it's racist to sit there and say that you support this man because he's black. That's racist. Because you're not looking at anything else. You're not doing the whole Martin Luther King thing of looking at the content of his character. You can't get past the physical facade. That's what we need to happen in this country. People need to get over what people look like, the color of their skin, in some cases their religious beliefs. Yes, we need to be mindful of radical ideas that come out of religious beliefs. I mean, we did have, and we can't look at just Muslims as having radical beliefs. Christians have had groups that are radical. KKK is one of them. So we need to be mindful of those cropping up. Yes, but we shouldn't attack people because of their religion. All these different things we have to work on as a nation. And we keep wanting to hand this off to somebody else. There's nobody else to hand it off to. You want to give it to the federal government, and look what they do to it. And you have a president dumb enough to sit there and say that raising the debt ceiling doesn't raise the national debt. Well, I'm going to go raise the credit limit on my credit card that I never use, but I'm going to tell them I'm not going to use the credit card. If you raise your credit limit, the credit card company is going to expect you to use that credit card. Ridiculous. And people follow along. And it's just, it's so mind-boggling that people follow suit because of his name, his skin color, but nothing to do with the content of his character. Now, I am going to play the Russell Brand, let's see if I have it here. Yeah. I'm going to play the Russell Brand interview. Actually, first, let me play Sebelius, or Sebelius, Kathleen Sebelius, and what she had to say when she said that you are not her employer. So let's listen into that.
Sebelius responding to calls for her resignation. Her answer may want her to have a do-over. She says she doesn't work for you.
Who have you fired?
No one has been fired. My goal is to actually get the website up and running.
Madam Secretary,
have you offered
what is
your resignation
your response
now?
to people who are calling for you to resign?
Well, the majority of people calling for me to resign, I would say, are people who I don't work for and who do not want this program to work in the first place. I have had frequent conversations with the President, and I've committed to him that my role is to get the program up and running, and we will do just that.
And today on Capitol Hill, finger-pointing and more finger-pointing and more.
Today, the Energy and Commerce Committee continues our
All right, well, that was part of Sebelius and what she had to say. And I didn't notice that my mic had muted itself on here, so if you're listening live, I am recording this so you can listen to the first part. I don't know when it muted, but that was her saying that she does not answer to the American people, basically. That what you and I think of her has no bearing on what she's going to do. She's going to do what she wants to. Now, again, with Brand, you know, Russell Brand had that interview. I think, again, that he had a good point, you know, that there is an issue with the system. I don't agree with his solutions, but I think that it's good to have people that sit there and are willing to say, you know, that there's an issue. Come forward and not go with the line of, it's, you know, Obama says so, we're going to do it. So I'm going to play the interview with Russell Brand, so you can listen to that. It's over 10 minutes.
Russell Brand, who are you to edit a political magazine?
Well, I just suppose like a person who's been politely asked by an attractive woman. I don't know what the typical criteria is. I don't know many people that edit political magazines. Boris, he used to do one, didn't he? So I'm a person with crazy hair, quite a good sense of humour, don't know much about politics, I'm ideal.
But is it true you don't even vote?
Yeah, no, I don't vote.
Well, how do you have any authority to talk about politics then?
Well, I don't get my authority from this pre-existing paradigm, which is quite narrow and only serves a few people. I look elsewhere for alternatives that might be of service to humanity. Alternate means alternate political systems.
They being?
Well, I've not invented it yet, Jeremy. I had to do a magazine last week. I've had a lot on my plate. But I say, but here's the thing it shouldn't do. Shouldn't destroy the planet. Shouldn't create massive economic disparity. Shouldn't ignore the needs of the people. The burden of proof is on the people with the power, not people like doing a magazine.
How do you imagine the people get power?
Well, I imagine there are sort of hierarchical systems that have been preserved through generations.
They get power by being voted in.
Well,
That's how they get it. You can't even be asked to vote.
It's quite a narrow prescriptive parameter that changes within the.
In a democracy, that's how it works.
Well, I don't think it's working very well, Jeremy. Given that the planet is being destroyed, given that there is economic disparity of a huge degree, what are you saying? There's no alternative. There's no alternative.
No, I'm not saying
system.
that. I'm saying if you can't be asked to vote, why should we be asked to listen to your political point of view?
You don't have to listen to my political point of view, but it's not that I'm not voting out of apathy. I'm not voting out of absolute indifference and weariness and exhaustion from the lies, treachery, deceit of the political class that has been going on for generations now, and which has now reached fever pitch, where we have a disenfranchised, disillusioned, despondent underclass that are not being represented by that political system. So voting for it is tacit complicity with that system, and that's not something I'm offering up.
Well, why don't you change it then?
I'm trying to.
Well, why don't you start by voting?
I don't think it works. People have voted already, and that's what's created the current paradigm.
When did you last vote?
Never.
You've never, ever voted?
No. Do you think that's really bad?
So you struck an attitude, what, before the age of 18?
Well, I was busy being a drug addict at that point because I come from the kind of social conditions that are exacerbated by an indifferent system that really just administrates for large corporations and ignores the population that it was voted in to serve.
You're blaming the political class of the fact you had a drug problem?
No. I'm saying I was part of a social and economic class that is underserved by the current political system, and drug addiction is one of the problems it creates when you have huge, underserved, impoverished populations. People get drug problems and also don't feel like they want to engage with the current political system because they see that it doesn't work for them. They see that it makes no difference. They see that they're not served.
Well,
I say that
it doesn't
the apathy,
work for them if they don't bother to vote.
Jeremy, my darling, I'm not saying that the apathy doesn't come from us, the people. The apathy comes from the politicians. They are apathetic to our needs. They're only interested in servicing the needs of corporations. Look at what ain't the Tories going to court and to taking the EU to court because they're trying to curtail bank bonuses. Is that what's happening at the moment in our country? It is, isn't it?
Yeah, there is.
So why am I going to tune in for that?
You don't believe in democracy. You want a revolution, don't you?
The planet is being destroyed. We are creating an underclass. We are exploiting poor people all over the world. And the genuine, legitimate problems of the people are not being addressed by our political class.
All of those things may be true.
They are true.
But you took... I wouldn't argue with you about many of them.
Well, how come I feel so cross with you? It can't just be because of that beard. It's gorgeous.
It's possibly because...
And if the Daily Mail don't want it, I do. I'm against them. Grow it longer. Tangle it into your armpit hair.
You are a very trivial man.
What do you think? I am trivial?
Yes.
A minute ago, you were having a go at me because I want a revolution. Now I'm trivial. I'm bouncing about
I'm
all
not
over
having
the
a
place.
go at you because you want a revolution. Many people want a revolution, but I'm asking you what it would be like.
Well, I think what it won't be like is a huge disparity between rich and poor, where 300 Americans have the same amount of wealth as the 85 million poorest Americans, where there is an exploited and underserved underclass that are being continually ignored, where welfare is slashed while Cameron and Osborne go to court to defend the rights of bankers to continue receiving their bonuses. That's all I'm saying.
What's the scheme? That's all I'm asking. What's the scheme? You talk vaguely about revolution. What is it?
I think a socialist egalitarian system based on the massive redistribution of wealth, heavy taxation of corporations and massive responsibility for energy companies and any company that's exploiting the environment, I think they should be I think the very concept of profit should be hugely reduced. David Cameron says profit isn't a dirty word. I say profit is a filthy word, because wherever there is profit there is also deficit, and this system currently doesn't address these ideas. And so why would anyone vote for it? Why would anyone be interested in it?
Who would levy these taxes?
I think we do need to, there needs to be a centralised administrative system, but built on... Yes,
there needs to be a government.
Well, we might maybe call it something else. Call them like the admin bods,
right,
so they don't get
And how would they be chosen?
Jeremy, don't ask me to sit here in an interview with you in a bloody hotel room and devise a global utopian system. I'm merely pointing out that
You're calling for revolution.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm calling for change. I'm calling for genuine alternatives.
But there are many people who would agree with you.
Good.
The current system is not engaging with all sorts of problems. Yes. And they feel apathetic. Really apathetic.
Yes.
But if they were to take you seriously and not to vote...
Yeah, they shouldn't vote. They should. That's one thing they should do. Don't bother voting. Because then when it reaches... There's a point. So these little valves, these sort of little cosy little valves of recycling and Prius and turn up somewhere, it stops us reaching the point where we think, oh, this is enough now. Stop voting. Stop pretending. Wake up. Be in reality now. Time to be in reality now. Why vote? We know it's not going to make any difference. We know that already. So, I have more impact at West Ham United, cheering them on. And they lost the City, unnecessarily, Saturday.
Okay, well, now you're being facetious.
Well, facetiousness has as much value as seriousness. I think you're making the mistake of mistaking seriousness.
You're not going to solve world problems by facetiousness.
We're not going to solve them with the current system. At least facetiousness is funny.
Sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes, Jeremy. So listen, let's approach this optimistically. You've spent your whole career berating and haranguing politicians, and then when, like me, a comedian goes, yeah, they're all worthless, what's the point in engaging with any of them? You sort of have a go at me because I'm not poor anymore. Well,
no, I'm not having a go at you about that. I'm just asking you why we should take you seriously when you're so unspecific.
You don't have to take... Well, firstly, I don't mind if you take me seriously. I'm here just to draw attention to a few ideas. I just want to have a little bit of a laugh. I'm saying there are people with alternative ideas that are far better qualified than I am, and far better qualified, more importantly, than the people that are currently doing that job, because they're not attempting to solve these problems. They're not. They're attempting to placate the population. The measures that are currently being taken around climate change are indifferent, will not solve the problem. You don't think
it's possible as human beings they're simply overwhelmed by the scale of the problem?
Not really. Well, possibly. It might be that. But that's sort of just semantics, really. Whether they're overwhelmed by it or tacitly maintaining it because of habitual... mate, this is what I noticed when I was in that Houses of Parliament. It's decorated exactly the same as Eton. It's decorated exactly the same as Oxford. So a certain type of people goes in there and thinks, oh, this makes me nervous. And another type of people go in there and go, this is how it should be. And I think that's got to change now. We can no longer have erroneous, duplicitous systems held in place unless it's for the only systems that serve the planet and serve the population of the planet can be allowed to survive. Not ones that serve elites, be they political or corporate elites. And this is what's currently happening.
You don't really believe that.
I completely believe it. Don't look at me all weary like you're at a fireside with a pipe in your beard.
Ed Miliband wasn't an elite.
Well, he went to the same primary school as Boris, though, didn't he?
He did, but he then went to a comprehensive school in North London.
Well, that's very good. That's all well and good. But what I'm saying is that within the existing paradigm, the change is not dramatic enough, not radical enough. So you can well understand public disturbances and public dissatisfaction when there are not genuine changes and genuine alternatives being offered. I say when there is a genuine alternative, a genuine option, then vote for that. But until then, don't bother. Why pretend? Why be complicit in this ridiculous illusion?
Because by the time somebody comes along you might think it worth voting for, it may be too late.
I don't think so, because the time is now. These movements are already occurring. It's happening everywhere. We're in a time where communication is instantaneous, and there are communities all over the world. The Occupy movement made a difference, even if only in that it introduced to the popular public lexicon the idea of the 1% versus the 99%. People for the first time in a generation are aware of massive corporate and economic exploitation. These things are not nonsense, and these subjects are not being addressed. No one's doing anything about tax havens. No one's doing anything about their political affiliations and financial affiliations of the Conservative Party. So until people start addressing things that are actually real, Why wouldn't I be facetious? Why would I take it seriously? Why would I encourage a constituency of young people that are absolutely indifferent to vote? Why would we? Aren't you bored? Aren't you more bored than anyone? Ain't you been talking to them year after year, listening to their lies, their nonsense? Then it's this one gets in, then it's that one gets in. But the problem continues. Why are we going to continue to contribute to this facade?
I'm surprised you can be facetious when you're that angry about it.
Yeah, I am angry. I am angry. Because for me it's real. Because for me, it's not just some peripheral thing that I turn up once in a while to a church fete for. For me, this is what I come from. This is what I care about.
Do you see any hope?
Remember that? Yeah, totally. There's going to be a revolution. It's totally going to happen. I tell you, not only I ain't got a flicker of doubt. This is the end. This is time to wake up. I remember I see you in that programme where you look at your ancestors and you saw that when your grandmother had to brass herself or got fucked over by the aristocrats who ran her gaff, you cried because you knew that it was unfair and unjust. And that was, what was that, a century ago? That's happening to people now. I just come from a woman who's being treated like that. I've just been talking to a woman today who's being treated like that. So if we can engage that feeling, instead of some moment of lachrymose sentimentality trotted out on the TV for people to pore over emotional porn, if we can engage that feeling and change things, why wouldn't we? Why is that naive? Why is that not my right because I'm an actor? I mean, I've taken the right. I don't need the right from you. I don't need the right from anybody. I'm taking it.
All right, well, that was the David Brand interview on, not David Brand, Russell Brand interview on the Jeremy Paxman show in England. And I have to say I disagree with his methodology or his thinking as far as the solution. I do agree with him that there is some major issues going on within our political system, that it is for the elites, that it is crony, capitalism. I think, though, his mindset is in the wrong direction. He wants to basically give more power to government. Redistribution of wealth, who's going to manage that? Government. So those type of things are not going to solve the problem. You have to unchain the markets. You have to get rid of regulations. Those are the issue. That's why you have huge corporations and small businesses that can't make it. It has everything to do with regulations. It has everything to do with crony capitalism. It has everything to do with these corporations having too much influence in our government. And when our government sits there and says that a corporation is the same as a person, that's an issue. And how can we trust anything the Supreme Court issues out? They say corporations are people, and then also they say Obamacare is constitutional. There's corruption that goes all the way into our court system, and we have to get rid of that for change to happen. I do agree also non-participation is an option, If nobody participates and there's still votes showing up in the system, then we know that there's fraudulent voting. But I think that his way of looking at it is more of the mindset of helping out people, but in the wrong way of doing it. It should be done through charity. It shouldn't be done by the government. The government should not do that. Charity should. And I bring this up to people, and people are like, oh, but no. We're the most charitable nation in the world. Whenever there's any kind of disaster, the largest sum of money comes from the U.S., nowhere else. So why is it that we sit there and we look at it as we're not charitable enough? That only the government can do this. We need to get rid of this mentality. I don't understand it. Charities are the viable solution, not the government, not the federal government especially. And people don't want to, relinquish the power the government has. They protect their power. I have no problem. Now, I talked to somebody about Planned Parenthood. I have no problem with them going into a private, charity. To become a private charity. If people want to give to Planned Parenthood, by all means give. But I don't think the federal government should give money to them. I don't think the government should have anything about abortion. I don't think the government should have anything about marriage. I think the government should stay out of your life. But with Planned Parenthood, give it as charity. And her comment was, well, $1 spent saves $10 down the line. And it's like, well, that's fine. Issue that as a private sector thing. Don't issue it as a government reasoning. The government should not be involved, period. That's the reason that you have so much turmoil, is the fact that these people that are, against abortion, feel wronged because their government's spending tax dollars. Their tax dollars to fund abortions. So, they have a right to be angry. Their religious rights are being stepped on. And when you look at it that way, then government intrusion's a bad thing. And that's what we need to wake up from. We need to wake up from this dream that the government can solve all our problems. It can't. Giving it to the government's like adding gas to a fire and expecting it to go out. It doesn't work that way. And the fact of the matter is, they work for us. I would like to give them less power. That's the reason we were formulated under a federal republic. You had a cap so that power couldn't siphon to the top. That's what they wanted to prevent. They wanted to prevent this. They wanted to prevent our government, our federal government, from becoming top-heavy. They wanted to prevent our federal government from taking all the power from the local and state governments. And that's what's happened. You have this mushroom cloud over Washington, D.C. of agencies that answer to no one. Please. I get where Russell Brand's coming from. I agree with him in the sentiment. But I don't agree with what he's saying. And again, I don't think we should attack Russell Brand because we disagree with his politics. I think it's commendable that he comes forward and steps up and says there's some major issues here. We need to have debate. We need to reach some kind of solution. People that, attack him don't get that he said several times, look, I'm not the one that should be given solutions. I am not qualified. So, but at least we have a celebrity here that's willing to stand up and say we have problems and, we need to look for solutions. Opening up the floor for debate. But you have so many celebrities nowadays that tote the Obama line, that tote the liberal line, that say that, progressivism is the answer, that socialism is the answer. It's not. It's never worked. There's never been one society that's had a socialist government that's worked out, except for China. And the reason China's working out so well, and I guess you can consider North Korea, even though it's really not, but the reason China's worked out so well is they have 2 billion people living in poverty, holding up the government. I mean, so if we had 2 billion people living in poverty, we'd probably be working out too. We'd all hate, the way we live, but we wouldn't want to argue with them because they have all the guns. But of course, you got so many people that see that life as being spectacular, I guess, because they want to go towards that. That's the most ridiculous thing ever. You can't give those kind of powers to the federal government. Health care. All of these things. Give it to the federal government and expect them to not mess it up. They're going to mess it up. They're going to make it worse. And with the whole debacle with Obamacare, and people are saying, oh, it's just because it's so popular. No. The website having 500 million lines of code is not because it's popular. It's because it was written horribly. And possibly on purpose. And then people put their information into the system if they can. And now they're in a database that God only knows who can get into. Please. It's not going to work. And we're all going to see our premiums go up. We're all going to see our deductibles go up. We're all going to see healthcare crash in this country like it has done in every other country that takes this on. You don't get premium care. The answer is not to consolidate power. The answer is to deregulate. to go to states and ask them to deregulate. It should be deregulated at the state line. Open up the borders. Allow competition in. You have a conclave of insurance companies that are within a state. They work together. They kind of help each other out, to come up with rates. Because they're the only games in town. You can't get insurance from somebody else because we're it. Well, open the borders up. Bring competition in, and then they actually have to fend for themselves. Deregulate the auto manufacturing. Why? Because you have two main auto manufacturers that need competition. They need more competition in that industry. Oh, we've got all these names, Scion and blah, blah, blah. And yet they're all headed up by two. If they're American-made, two auto manufacturers. Doesn't work. But anyway, I want to leave you with my verbal blog. And I've titled this one, Illusions of a Boulder and a Fence. I hope you enjoy this. The national debt is like a boulder we push down the road. When we grow old and tired, we hand off the job to our kids. When they turn around and question the reason why we do this, the parents become the slave drivers, as their parents have been to them. They become crass and feed the lines they were fed. This is the way it has to be. Freedom isn't free. We have to fall in line to make the machine work. Sometimes we all have to be reminded of our rebellious spirit, left back on the playground. Conformity can be more dangerous than anarchy. It can indoctrinate us into all manner of things, simply because we do not pay attention. Going along with the daily grind in a state of miserable slumber, unaware of the crumbling world around us, conformity is slavery's best friend. It willfully leads its victims into seemingly inescapable scenarios. But the reality is there is always an escape, if you choose not to participate. I am reminded of a day I went out to water my garden. On approach to the little garden I had planted in my backyard, I noticed a squirrel standing on the ground staring up at me. He panicked, as expected, and took off right into a loose roll of chicken wire fencing. I had left the loose roll of chicken wire fencing standing next to the garden, after removing my failed cucumber plants it was meant to support, as I figured out what to do next with it. The squirrel darted back and forth in the fencing, to my astonishment. It seemed he did not know he could go back the way he came, or climb up it. It was as if his fear had locked him into an endless back-and-forth cycle. I slowly approached the fencing and began to unravel it. As I did, the squirrel in his panic darted up the fence towards my hand, which I jerked back, since I didn't know if he intended to bite me. He then climbed back down the fence and continued running back and forth. It seemed that his fear again had overruled his critical thinking. There he was at the top of the fence, and he could have escaped, but he chose to head back to the false sense of safety he found with the fence. I finally was able to get, for the most part, the fence unrolled. Just as I did, the squirrel looked up. Seeing the top of the fence, he began to climb up the middle. He then jumped off and headed up the nearest tree, his drive for freedom overriding his sense of fear. The moral of this story is to not be trapped by illusions of boundaries that do not exist. All right, well, that was my verbal blog. Again, I'll have that every once in a while for you guys. And I hope you enjoyed that. But again, my website crashed today, libertythemovement.com. I am working on getting that back up. That should be up by the end of the weekend. So, yeah, I got my work cut out for me this weekend. Anyway, I want to say thank you for listening tonight. Sorry about some of the issues I had earlier with the microphone. But, again, thanks for listening, and have a good night.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.